It's giving me this vibe if I were to do more units in S. Kafka is broken, Tingyun is broken, Bronya is broken, Clara is broken, Welt is broken, Asta is broken, March Siren is broken. Like, everyone is broken. That's why I don't want to diminish the value of S, right?
We're sad. We're sad.
Hey guys, Mr. Pookie here, back with another video. So this is gonna be the part 2 of the version 1.2 tier list. Yesterday we were discussing about our DPS tier list, and today I also have with me my chat talking about the version 1.2 support and sustain tier list, right? So this is gonna wrap up our tier list discussion for version 1.2. If you guys want to know the context for this tier list, kindly check out this infographic over here. And it's the same as the one we have did for the DPS tier list. Feel free to screenshot it, take a pause, and you understand what this tier list is about. But with that out of the way, let's jump straight into today's content. For the first unit in our support tier list is going to be Asta. Now, I think it's a pretty general consensus. I don't think there's much discussion about this. She's a really solid A tier unit. Above average, but not exactly at S tier. Asta, one of her biggest and best benefits is that she's really cheap to raise. You really just need to level her ultimate and her talent, and her entire function is done. For gearing, just make sure that she does not die and is fast enough to keep up with your entire team. Right? That's really all there is to it, which in turn leads to an excellent investment value for new players. Considering that she's free, I'll be very disappointed if new players do not level their Asta. Really good investment value, great MOC, great in contents that are weak to fire, excellent toughness bar damage, almost 100% uptime on her attack buff. It just depends on how strong this attack buff is, but generally speaking, a very good support to have. And I guess I just want to take this moment to say none of the supports here are considered bad by any means, because we do need to use supports to a very large extent for all our team comps, right? Every single team comp that we run, we're going to need some supports. But unfortunately, because of the nature of tier list, as well as the fact that not everybody can be above average, right? Same as some of the healers, unfortunately, some of them will be in the B tier or C tier. But I just want to say, all supports in this game, they are really good to have. So the final verdict for Asta is going to be a solid A tier. For the next unit in the support tier list is going to be Bronya. And I think this goes without saying, Bronya is an undisputed S tier by now, right? Exactly the same as my previous version 1.1 tier list. I don't think that Bronya's impact in the metagame has changed at all. Crit damage buff, attack buff, a damage buff from an A6 trace, action advance forward with her own basic attack, not to mention the biggest benefit of all, her extra turn mechanic. I've said this thing once and I said this thing again, extra turn mechanics in a turn-based game is and always will be the best buff you can have for your entire team, which is why Sile is so damn good. Although she might not be as skill point friendly as some of the other supports, for example, Asta is more skill point friendly, it is undeniable that Bronya's skill point benefits from her using a skill point is really high, because it's an extra turn. Players can also manage Bronya's skill point usage by just alternating between her basic attack as well as her skill. Since her basic attack gives her an action advance forward, she cycles a lot faster than typical supports, right? Cycling between auto attack, skill, and she's essentially skill point neutral. And this is also the cycle for a fast Bronya. Also, Bronya has cleanse. Bottom line, goes without saying, Bronya is going to be in the S tier. Alright, moving on to our next support is going to be Pela. And generally speaking, Pela should be in A tier, and I do personally believe that Pela does edge out Asta a little bit. And the biggest reason is really just because defense down debuffs, they are more scarce compared to attack buffs, right? A lot of supports in the game, and in fact I would dare say every single harmony support in the game we have right now, they all buff our unit's attack. So Asta's attack buff doesn't really have a lot of value as compared to Pela's defense threat. If you're a new player that just started playing the game and did not pull for Silver Wolf, Pela is the only source of defense threat we have in the game right now. Not to mention her defense down is an AoE defense down. If you guys have played Pela since the version 1.1 and you have her event light cone equipped, then she can cast her ultimate every 2 turns with Joyce using auto attack, so she's extremely skill point efficient. That is the main reason why I'll rate Pela above Asta, but generally speaking, they are both really similar. They're both super cheap to raise, right? You just need their talent and ultimate. They're both very skill point friendly. I would dare say Pela is a little bit more, unless you need to use skill. Going into the investment values for it, especially if you want to consider like future investment values, right? I do believe that buff removal will see more usage as the game progresses, right? More and more annoying buffs can be introduced, so when that day happens, Pela's buff removal will gain a lot more upside compared to Asta in regards, right? So final verdict for Pela is going to be in the A tier. Alright, for our next unit in the support tier list is going to be Tingyun. Before we do rank her, I want to say that considering Tingyun's kits alone, in the grand scheme of things, I do believe that she's worthy to be S. Unfortunately, I don't want the ranking of S to be so diluted with a lot of units. So because of this reason alone, I'll be dropping her at the top of A tier. But just do note that her kit is so good that I would place her in S if we had more units. But unfortunately, we just had too little supports to justify every single support being placed in S tier, right? So because of this, Tingyun will be at the top of the A tier, gatekeeping the other supports in the future, right? Now, Tingyun, I think it goes without saying, her kit is just super versatile, super good. She can really just run with most, if not all team comps, right? Energy battery, attack buff, damage buff, as well as skill point friendly. I think these are all really good things that places Tingyun pseudo S tier, right? But it will be the top of A tier. Speaking of investment, I do want to say a little bit of a downside, that is Tingyun, I would say she's a little bit harder to build compared to the rest of the units we have over here. Because, for example, Pela and Asta, you really just need for them to be fast enough and tanky enough. Whereas for Tingyun, you need her to be fast, you need her to be tanky, and you need to build a little bit of attack on her. Honestly, not a little bit, quite a bit, right? It's around 2.5k, right? So for the average new players, it might be quite difficult to achieve the right gear requirements for Tingyun so that she has enough attack, she doesn't die from one hit, and fast enough. So definitely higher investments needed for Tingyun to work. But once you have this benchmark in terms of relic investment, she pretty much can be slotted into every single team comp. And because of this, final ranking for Tingyun, I would say pseudo S, but right now, I'm going to say A. Now, moving on to the next unit, which is the second last support unit that we have, is Silver Wolf, right? After considering the criteria we have for our ranking, she's definitely S, but since this is based on best investment value for new players as of patch 1.2, Silver Wolf, in my opinion, is the best of the best support characters we have in the entire game, because weakness in plant directly saves players' resources. And no other units can do this, right? Think of it this way. Can you clear a stage, right? Hard clear a stage by being off element? Yes, you can, right? You can use Silly, you can be in the off element. As long as Silly has the right investment, she can clear it, no problems. Can you also clear a stage by being on the right element without the necessary supports? For example, if your Silly is against a quantum weakness enemy, can you still clear the stage without Bronya, or without Tingyun, or without Pela or Asta? She probably still can, right? Because she's on the right element, and weakness break in this game is just that important. Silver Wolf literally allows players to save up resources by not building so many different main DPSs because of the weakness in plant mechanic. And for this reason alone, she has the best investment value for all players. We're not talking about the highest DPS increase, right? Because if we are talking about highest DPS increase, then Bronya will give any unit the highest DPS increase because of extra turn. But when it comes to investments, right? How much more resource can you save? What's the best bang for your buck? Future proofness. Then I think by all senses, because of that, Silver Wolf is the best of the best in terms of supports. And I am open to discussions, and we have discussed with my chat quite a while between which one should go on top, Bronya or Silver Wolf. Ultimately, this is the conclusion we come up with regards to investments, right? Investment value, right? So final verdict, Silver Wolf is the top of the S tier. Now moving on to our final unit in the support tier list for version 1.2, it's gonna be Yukong. Unfortunately, at E0, I can't really justify placing Yukong in the same tier as the rest of the supports at A tier because she is a lot harder to use because of the whole speed tuning thing, right? What I mean by speed tuning is, although speed tuning benefits every single support to a certain extent, for example, if you speed tune your Tingyun to be faster than your main DPS, then your main DPS can gain the buff from Tingyun's benediction, right, before her turn. If your main DPS is faster than your Tingyun, then she's not gonna get Tingyun's buff, right? So speed tuning generally it applies to every single support, but for Yukong it is especially so because Yukong, if you don't speed tune her, your main DPS literally gains no benefits whatsoever. This is an exception if you have Yukong at E6, but unfortunately, we are talking about a unit at E0 counterparts, right? So at E0 is an absolute must to speed tune Yukong to your main DPS. And if you don't do this, then it's gonna be a little bit problematic. And since our tier list is based on more for like newcomers, free to play, just be a little bit more welcoming for players just starting out in the game, then Yukong is gonna be a lot harder to manage compared to the rest of the supports. Trying to speed tune in the early stage of the game is also pretty difficult, since you don't really have access to a lot of gears with speed substats, right? Even if you want to speed tune, you might not be able to speed tune, right? So at the end of the day, I'm not saying that Yukong is not good. She provides excellent attack buffs, and she's the only unit right now that can buff our crit rate, enabling things like Routine, Arena, Salsoto, super good. But when it comes to investment value, I would say that she is a little bit subpar compared to the rest of the supports unit, right? And that's gonna wrap up for our version 1.2 support tier list in terms of investment values. And now we're gonna be moving on to our final tier list, which is gonna be the sustain tier list. So for the first unit in version 1.2 sustain tier list is going to be Luocha. I think it goes without saying, and it's pretty safe to say that Luocha is gonna be in the S tier. And if I could make a tier for Luocha himself, he would be it. Any new players, if they could only have one unit in Honkai Star Rail, or rather the very first unit they have, imagine this as a pick your own Pokemon or your starter Pokemon. Probably everybody would want to say Luocha, right? He gives you heal, he gives you cleanse, he doesn't use skill point, he has buff dispel. All these integrated into a kit that is just absolutely perfection for any sort of team comp. Oh my god, and I forgot, he has a 70% crowd control rest. So the chances of Luocha getting crowd controlled, which is the bane for all sustained units, is gonna be very unlikely for Luocha. Gepard definitely can't be S, because Luocha is just too good. Like nothing comes close to Luocha, right? So unfortunately, Gepard can't be S. I wouldn't say Bailu is A or B. I'm just gonna talk about Gepard first, right? I was not a believer of Gepard initially, until this Tuesday stream. For those of you guys who are here, welcome to Tuesday stream, right? I was doing a 3-man challenge for myself, clearing MOC with only 3 men. I did not ever intend to use Gepard. Chat was like, okay, why don't you just try Gepard? Just try him, right? Just try him. And try him I did, right? I basically just slapped on the most random shit gear on Gepard. It opened my eyes to how freaking insane a character with high taunt value is. The situation was, right, I was using Gepard in Starrock, in the Starrock stage. And in the Starrock stage, there was a lot of enemies, the single target enemies that, the chainsaw guy, the chainsaw robot guy, he'll hit you for a ton of damage. But because Gepard, his taunt value, right, he has taunt value in his trace, Preservation unit has very high taunt value, and he has taunt value in his light cone. His taunt value is so high that literally every single hit that an enemy would have given to my team was directed at Gepard. Because Gepard is so tanky in the sense that he has very high defense, right? He's just not taking a lot of damage. It's like scratches to him. It's like nothing to him, right? And because I'm running ER rope, every single time they hit Gepard's energy generates, right? Every time you get hit, you generate 10 energy. A little bit more if you have ER rope. So because of this, my Gepard's ultimate bar was charging up really fast. To the point where my 2 other units, right? This is a 3-man MOC, a 3-man. My 2 other units, the shield was so thick that it wouldn't even penetrate to their health bar, right? That's how thick Gepard's shield is. Coupled with the fact that he has such a high taunt value, the rest of my units were just not taking damage. And even if they do take damage, Gepard's shield is just so thick that they can't even get through, right? And by the time Gepard's ultimate charge up again, the shields weren't even broken, right? So what I'm trying to say is, even though my Gepard, he doesn't have cleanse, right? Oh shit, my Gepard doesn't have cleanse. He's such a bad unit. It got to the point where I didn't even need cleanse, because every single time they were hitting him, they were not hitting the rest of my team, right? I used Gepard in the Decaying Shadow stage as well, MOC 10, 2 Decaying Shadows, 1 Gepard, 1 Kafka, and I believe 1 Tingyun, right? Every single hit, or rather 90% of hits, they were directed at Gepard, right? Oh shit, Gepard got imprisoned. He doesn't have cleanse. What am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? It doesn't matter, because even though your Gepard is getting crowd controlled, he still generates energy, right? It doesn't even matter if Gepard is slowed or imprisoned or frozen or this kind of stuff. He still generates energy while crowd control. And the moment his energy is full, boom, you cast it, and your entire team just got a shield, right? So that day truly opened my eyes to our Lord savior, Gepard. Moving on to our next unit, which is going to be Bailu. We just had a really long discussion within me and my chat as well, the community. I'm just going to be ranking Bailu and Natasha at the same place together. This is in my personal opinion. Bailu at B tier, same as Natasha, but she does edge out Natasha slightly because I do believe that Bailu having revive is a very unique mechanic that somebody else doesn't have. For example, if you take a look at Natasha, she has basically been power crept by Luocha in every single conceivable way. She does everything that Natasha does, but better. Cleanse, heals, and everything. Whereas for Bailu, this revive mechanic, honestly, in my opinion, can still see some usage in the future. For example, any sort of content where if the boss was to one-shot you, Bailu can be there to revive your ass, right? An excellent example, for example, the general, right? The general unit that does the spear throw, if he hits the same unit twice, and if the unit is very squishy, nothing can save you, right? The only thing that can save you then is either a shield or Bailu's revive. So in that sense, I feel that Bailu's revive does have a little bit more usage than what people say, right? And of course, her being a 5-star and her having better healing multipliers does heal for more as compared to Natasha. Of course, Natasha is still really good in the sense where she has cleanse, but going forward into the future in terms of investment value, I do think that players, especially for new players, gain a little bit more mileage out of Bailu when investing, right? A 4k HP Bailu is gonna give them a little better experience compared to a 4k HP Natasha, right? Investment for investment, pound for pound, value for value, I do think that Bailu edges out in Natasha. And that's gonna be the final verdict. Bailu in the B tier as well as Natasha in the B tier, just slightly below Bailu, right? Now moving on to our final two units for our entire version 1.2 tier list is going to be March 7th and Fire MC. So for these two units, with me and my community, we have decided that they do not sustain as well as the rest of the units here, in particular compared to Bailu and Natasha. So for that reason, both of them will be in the C tier. And the very big reason why they are in the C tier, before everybody burn me at the stake, is because for a sustained unit, I believe that not only do you need to have the criteria of keeping your team alive, you should also be a unit that does not rely on skill points. And all other units in the sustained class achieve those objectives, right? Those criteria. Luocha, Gepard, Bailu, Natasha, they can all perfectly sustain your team without using that much skill points. Whereas for Fire MC and March, they pretty much have to use skill points. Otherwise, they are not able to sustain your team because both of their ultimates, they do not provide any shields or heals to your team. As to whether March is better than Fire MC, I have been talking about this with my chat for the past half an hour. My personal opinion is that March 7th slightly sustains more than Fire MC, right? Because her ultimate is a freeze. And freeze helps you sustain more since you crowd controls the enemy compared to Fire MC's ultimate that is a damaging ultimate, right? It doesn't really help with a sustain, right? And for March, she does have a cleanse, so in kinds of any pesky situations, if your DPS gets hit or whatever kind of stuff, she can provide this emergency cleanse that Fire MC will not be able to do. And lastly, Fire MC's shield is just really small, and the damage reduction is mainly for herself. Although her team also gets a little bit of damage reduction, this is also tied to a skill, right? Whereas for March 7th, the shield is really thick, right? If you place that shield on a target, it's very unlikely that the unit will die anytime soon. Whereas for Fire MC, everybody just have this minuscule amount of shield that I feel personally that March sustains a little bit easier than Fire MC, right? But honestly, it is quite divided. And I'm actually gonna be leaving this for you guys, YouTube, in the comments down below. Who do you think is actually better sustained between both of them, March 7th or Fire MC? Feel free to leave your thoughts down in the comments. And this will be the final summary of the sustained tier list for version 1.2, best investment value for new players. Alright, and with that, we have come to the end of the version 1.2 support and sustain tier list. This is the summary for the support, and this is the summary for the sustain. And that's all we have for the entire version 1.2 tier list covering DPS, support, and sustain. It has been a really long time making this with my Twitch chat. If you guys want to know how you guys can participate in this activity, feel free to check out twitch.tv/MrPokey. We have been streaming for the past 5 hours and 42 minutes, but I will of course be editing this video to all of my followers in YouTube, right? We've finally come to the end. If you guys would like to check out my Discord with a very active community, feel free to check out discord.gg/Pokey'sVillage. We have a very big community of players talking about Honkai Star every single day. And with that, we've finally come to the end of today's content, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.